You're listening to the Dead Presidents Podcast, and this is
Presidential War. What is it good for? Intellectual stimulation. Say it again now. Presidential War. What is it good for? Presidential.
You're listening to the Dead Presidents Podcast. I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
I'm James J. Hamilton.
And we're joined by the indubitable Jeremy Lese, a.k.a. Otis.
Greetings and salutations.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. We're here for another exciting installment of Presidential War, America's favorite educational presidential card game.
Now at a school near you.
Coming soon.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be marketing this to schools.
Yeah.
For the kids to play. And
make sure the teachers are all, get the students all up to speed on the First Lady looks category.
That's right. I think that the teachers that would question incorporating the game into their lesson plans ought to be questioned themselves. Are they really fit to teach our kids?
I don't know how you can graduate high school without knowing, which presidents are better at flag football or
that's right.
in fights.
These are important things. So, listeners, your kids don't need anything more than the Dead Presidents Podcast. And for fun time, they don't need anything more than Presidential War, which is about to begin. Gentlemen, please draw your first cards.
I've got George W. Bush.
Ulysses S. Grant.
And they are going head-to-head in the category of relationship with the people.
Wow.
This
George
is an
W.
interesting
Bush,
one.
he started off more a man of the people. Well, he didn't win the popular vote, so less than 50% of the people coming in.
Yep.
But, he was the guy who, you want to have a beer with. He's the down-home, charismatic candidate.
Sure.
And then after 9/11, huge approval ratings.
Right. That's true.
Had a lot of the people on his side at the time. He was there at ground zero with the bullhorn among the firefighters and stuff. That was a good man of the people moment. And then, things took a bit of a turn.
Yeah. Well, I've said it before. I think we've all lived through this. We could all agree that I don't think we could remember the country more united in our lifetime than right after September 11th.
Mm-hmm. September 12th was one of the best days in this country because we were all united against one common enemy in the shadows.
We were together.
Mm-hmm.
For that brief moment. And it didn't take too awful long, however, for things to change.
Yeah.
But now, more recently, you do have Bush bouncing back a little bit.
Yeah, people soften on him a little bit.
It's easy to soften on him after the 4 years we just had.
Well,
yeah, 45th president making the 43rd look a little better.
And people like his paintings. I, for one, enjoy his paintings.
Yeah,
well,
very talented.
He's no Hitler, but...
Yeah, he's no Hitler when it comes to paintings, but George W. Bush, by God...
Yeah, when he was president, some people would say Bush is Hitler. Not as a leader, and not as a painter either.
That's right. And Ulysses S. Grant.
General Grant. Very popular because of his leadership in the Civil War.
Indeed.
Easily won popular vote in his election.
That's right.
It was, the start of a new day in America.
Pretty easily reelected to a second term.
Yeah. He seemed to be fairly popular. Didn't have nearly
If he lacked popularity anywhere, it was in the South. But
Yeah.
we're in Reconstruction here,
Right.
and
There were still some open wounds
indeed,
in the South immediately after the war, and those wounds are going to take a long time to heal. Certain parts of the South,
Yeah.
you go, it's like the war never ended. Mm-hmm. They're real big on alternative facts in places like Arkansas.
yeah,
Yeah, well, they're still flying their flag.
yeah. That's it.
Yeah, Grant, I think he had just such a big reserve of goodwill from being, winning the Civil War.
Yeah,
And looks like, he won 53% of the popular vote. His first election, re-elected with 56%.
Yeah.
So even going up.
There's a quote from Robert E. Lee himself. I have carefully searched the military records of both ancient and modern history and have never found Grant superior as a general. So even his opponent in battle
respected him.
respected him,
Yeah.
saw who he was as a leader.
Yeah,
I think a lot of his problem is as president with the corruption of people around him. People even, gave him,
the benefit of the doubt.
never considered him as being personally corrupt.
Right.
And then his great overseas post-presidential trip, he's very, very well received wherever he goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
He did up a big tour. Well, there was
Viceroy of India.
the Viceroy of India had
sarcastic
a little
about him.
something to say about Grant's visit there, but
I
it
think he
didn't
probably-
hurt his public image.
No.
And when he did write his memoirs, they did exactly what he wanted to do.
Sold a lot of copies.
Yeah, they sold a lot of copies, moved a lot of paper.
Yeah, I think he probably outsold Decision Points by George W. Bush.
Indeed.
I think he probably wins this category.
Yeah, I'm going to say as moderator here today, I am going to award this category to Ulysses S. Grant.
Coming up next, I've got Teddy Roosevelt.
Jimmy Carter.
And they are going head to head in the category of First Lady looks.
Ooh.
I'm going to say right off the bat,
Well,
Tior's first wife
Rosalind
disqualified, even though she was the
not
hotter
the first
of the two.
lady. Rosalind Carter, returning champion in this category.
Yeah, that's right. Rosalind Carter won this last time. She's defending her title.
Yeah, a couple episodes ago, she beat Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Let's take a
Boy,
look.
that was a tough match.
Let's take a look at looking up Edith Roosevelt here on the internet. Yeah, not too bad, but I don't think she's living up to Rosalind Carter.
Yeah,
What
unfortunately,
was
Alice.
TR's first wife's name?
Alice Lee.
She was Alice also.
Yeah. She was the more attractive of the two. She would win. However, she was not a first lady. So we can't give that to her.
But I will say about Jimmy Carter, I'm not a big fan of his track record when he was president. But post-presidency, the man is 96 years old, has a brain tumor, and is still building houses for the poor. Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
We've said it multiple times on the show. Jimmy Carter is easily the best man as a human being that's ever been president.
Yeah, pretty much.
There's no question about it. On the list of presidents not going to hell, Jimmy Carter is number one, and that is a lonely list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think he's gonna
However,
win this category.
yeah,
also.
in this category, we're going to give it to Rosalind Carter over Edith Roosevelt. Rosalind successfully defending the First Lady looks belt.
Yeah. She's carrying a lot of water. That Jimmy Carter card is not worth a lot in many categories.
That's right.
It's pretty good in that one.
Indeed. And next up,
Oh, I've got John Adams.
Grover Cleveland.
and we got second term Cleveland.
Ah, his
Now there
second
are
term.
yeah, that's right. There are two terms of Cleveland represented here.
Right.
That could be important. It could be not relevant at all. As it is here. Well, I guess you could argue it, but these guys are competing in best president overall. Now, do we limit this to second term Cleveland? Or do we include Cleveland's first term?
I think we can include his first term.
Very well. Grover Cleveland,
Overall.
overall as a president, John Adams.
Well, I think Adams is generally underrated as president. He, fallen between Washington and Jefferson. He doesn't get a lot of credit.
It
He's
is easy
no
to be
George Washington, and then Thomas
no
Jefferson
shadow.
created his whole era. But things were pretty good during the Adams administration. Like in terms of following George Washington, he held his own.
Yeah.
The economy was humming during that time, and Adams pretty much personally averted war with France against the advice of his cabinet and some maybe more warmongering members of his party, like Alexander Hamilton. He had the Sedition Act. Not great.
Not a great look.
Although, we're reading some things recently about, the development of the right of free speech. And, the classic English right of free speech was not as robust of a right as we think of it now. So that what they were doing in the Sedition Act was not really, far removed from other things that had been going on. And even, Jefferson famously denouncing the Sedition Act, but then during his presidency, he's behind the table having people prosecuted under state libel laws for the same kind of things.
True that.
I generally think John Adams close to the top tier of presidents. Maybe just on the outside of it.
I would actually agree with that. I think Grover Cleveland, honestly, his administration notwithstanding, I just find it a little odd that he married a girl that he watched grow up.
Well, yeah, there's that.
He's our number
and I
one,
know that's not-
number one cradle robber.
Number one presidential cradle robber, Grover Cleveland. And, he had...
Hey, this isn't the first lady looks category.
That's right.
Can't blame him.
And we're not talking scandals. How, as president, where does Grover Cleveland come in? Now, he's one that I feel, first term, pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Second term, ugh.
Yeah.
Most two-term presidents are like that, but
Exactly.
he has 4 years in between.
He has 4 years in between.
An
to stew over
interregnum.
it. Right. But his first term, I think he's best known for wielding the veto.
And
I
is
mean,
that
this
a
is-
good thing?
Well, he's reestablishing presidential superiority in a time where we were drifting away from the executive branch being in control.
Yeah, you got a lot of congressional ascendancy post-Civil War.
Yeah.
Cleveland, the first Democratic president since the Civil War.
That's right.
Standing up to the Republican Congress. He stayed behind the gold standard when some other Democratic Party people.
Yeah, you're moving
got
into
off
William
that.
Jennings Bryan territory here.
Yeah, he didn't support Bryan when he was the nominee.
Right. Bryan's talking all about
96.
free silver. In 1896, that's right.
He created the Interstate Commerce Act in 1887. And this was done to make sure that railroad rates were reasonable and just, and to put an end to rebates and other discriminatory practices.
Yeah,
He's
that
not
was
a big fan of tariffs either.
No.
No.
Yeah, reduced tariffs. Yeah, and that railroad regulation, like, yeah, it seems like that's kind of a thing that got picked up by Cleveland's friend TR with the trust busting. Because the railroads would, like, you know, they were in the pocket of, like, Standard Oil, and the big, like, the people who shipped big volume on the railroads would, like, set their own rates, and everyone else would be screwed. But they re-regulated them so that they are considered common carriers, and they have to charge everyone the same rates.
This is a tough one. I feel I got to give it to Cleveland. I think that Cleveland kind of helped to remake the presidency in a sense. Adams, I agree, underrated. I don't know that he belongs higher on the list than Cleveland. They both have good and bad. It's a really tough call.
Yeah, it is close.
I think perhaps close enough that I'm going to call this a draw.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sounds good.
we'll rule it a draw.
We'll roll these cards over into the next hand. A lot riding on the next draw. Oh, good for me, because I got Abe Lincoln.
Uh-oh.
Well,
James
we'll
Garfield.
see what the category is.
The category, military accomplishments.
Oh.
You could factor in both the presidency and personal service. Garfield actually served. Lincoln, well, I mean, kind of Black Hawk War.
Yeah, he served in the militia in the Black Hawk War. Said it was pretty uneventful. He said the only blood he shed for his country was 2 mosquitoes.
Right.
But then, of course, he was the commander-in-chief
During the
Civil War, which was pretty huge. Probably more like hands-on than any other war president in terms of, I mean, well, there's Polk, of course, but like, I mean, like, the war was like within miles of DC, though.
True.
And a lot more moving parts to the Civil War than the Mexican-American War.
That's right. And Garfield, of course, served in that war.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, you know, trying to remember what Garfield was doing, because he was elected to Congress during the war.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much time he's in. I think he was on. Let me see.
1863 to 1880, he was a U.S. rep.
Yeah, and he was Ohio State Senator. Let's see, till 1861. Joined the Union Army. Elected to Congress in 1862 while still in uniform. Served on the Military Affairs Committee. So
maybe more limited
served,
service.
but I think his like on the front service was a shorter amount of time, and then was on military affairs in Congress, which is important. But
yeah, it's important, but I don't think it holds a candle to Lincoln here.
Yeah, I gotta go Lincoln.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, you can't hold a candle to winning the Civil War.
That's it.
Yeah.
This one's gonna go on stage. Those 4 cards will go to James J.
So far, so good.
Next up,
We've got John Tyler.
James Madison.
Tyler V. Madison in the category of who would you guys most like to meet? You got the father of the Constitution and the guy that established the precedent of a vice president taking over after a president is felled by God. However, he also became a traitor, joined the Confederacy, and died a treasonable cur.
Mm-hmm. The father of the Constitution versus the father of 15 children.
That's right.
I think I'd most like to meet Mr. Madison there.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have to go definitely with Madison.
I feel like
I
that's
like
a
John
pretty...
Tyler, but James Madison, he's a legend.
Yeah, I'm not gonna knock John Tyler. He'd be fun to hang out with.
Absolutely. I would have some questions for John Tyler, certainly.
Sure, but James Madison, he's the father of the Constitution.
Right.
He'd probably play a game of chess with you.
Probably.
Yeah.
And you could have a really great discussion about the Constitution and his interpretation of it. Yeah, I don't think there's any question here. This one's going to Madison.
Yeah, meeting John Tyler, that might be better if Julia Tyler was there. But then Dolly Madison, definitely would love to meet her.
Yeah, for sure. She'd be bringing you drinks while you play chess.
Mm-hmm.
Picture a scene in the film where, like, you know, she comes over to bring you a drink and kind of, like, leans over a little bit. Like, there's a little bit of that buxom.
Yeah. Wearing those dresses that Abigail Adams called an outrage upon all decency.
That's right. She's got that buxom pop.
Yeah.
But next
up, I've got the buxom pop of Harry Truman.
Versus Zachary Taylor.
In domestic policy.
Wow.
This is an interesting one. Harry Truman considered more for his foreign policy. For the most part. Now, we had some civil rights work with Truman. Zachary Taylor, his administration was pretty much on domestic policy.
Yep. Working up towards the Compromise of 1850.
Yeah, that's it.
Obviously not completed until just after his death.
Yeah, but that is heating up under Taylor. Taylor responding to calls for potential war in Texas.
Threats of secession.
And this is post-Mexican.
Oh, this is post-Mexican.
Yeah, there was threats of secession out there, and Taylor was like, no fucking way.
Yeah. Yeah, he threw down. I think it's quote
like, that's
there.
one thing that we've wondered on the show is like, what if Taylor lived?
Yeah. Yeah, you think, you want to wonder whether Civil War could have been averted or something, and then you look at, like, Fillmore, Pierce, Buchanan. If anything was going to be done, it would have taken, like, a towering figure, and those three guys, whatever their merits, they weren't that guy.
Right.
Taylor,
Taylor potentially could have been that guy.
The way he responded to those Texans.
He was not fucking around, boy.
I will take command of the army myself. If you are taken in rebellion against the Union, I will hang you with less reluctance than I hanged deserters and spies in Mexico. I think that quote by itself is like worth more than the presidencies of Fillmore, Pierce, and Buchanan put together.
Yeah, you could have a point there. That is an incredible position. Zach Taylor.
Yeah, would have been the Civil War of 1850, maybe, if he had stuck around.
You never know. It very well could have been.
Mm.
Would have been a different story.
Wasn't Truman behind... Didn't he sign the Interstate Highway Act?
I picture more Eisenhower with the interstate highway system.
Yeah.
I think that's Eisenhower.
Oh, okay.
Truman did try to get some civil rights stuff off the ground.
Yeah. Truman, he's got the fair deal. Increased minimum wage, extended Social Security coverage, desegregated the armed forces, passed the Housing Act of 1949, the Taft-Hartley Act passed over Truman's veto. which curbed labor rights. Truman standing up for labor rights there.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned in the last presidential war episode, his seizure of the steel mills to keep them open during the strike, which was declared unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Truman, I think he's a pretty high-rated president, but mostly for foreign policy things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Zachary Taylor's domestic policy, albeit brief, was fierce.
Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't going to stand up for any shit, but I don't know if that's enough to eke out over Harry Truman here.
Yeah, Taylor was for the immediate admission of California and New Mexico as free states.
Right.
I just realized New Mexico didn't get admitted as a state until 1912.
That's right.
So
When William
it
Howard
had to
Taft
sit
was
on the
there.
shelf for like 62 years
Mm-hmm.
because Southerners wouldn't listen to Zachary Taylor.
That's right. This is an interesting one here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Taylor was against the fugitive slave portion of the proposed compromise.
Yeah.
Also unconstitutional grounds.
Yeah, he surprised a lot of Southerners with that. I think I want to call this one a draw.
This one is pretty close.
It's really close in my mind. Is Taylor has the brevity, but I love his stance. Firm, you know. Truman, though, also, he's the buck stops here president. Truman is a firm man. These guys have something in common. I'm going to proclaim this is a draw.
Yeah, I won't argue with that.
So moving on.
I've got William Henry Harrison.
Millard Fillmore.
Oh, boy, this is going to be great. We got two Whigs here. And let's just say it. We could look at both of these guys in their prime, if we want.
Okay.
Gentlemen, who's going to win in a fight?
Ooh.
Ah. Uh-huh.
Millie Film, whom Queen Vic would think of when she fondled her Downton Abbey.
Yep.
And
She called him the handsomest man she'd ever met, but
Willie Harrison.
Is Harrison going to blacken his eyes a bit, make him not so pretty for Queen Victoria?
That's right, Willie Harrison. He got that war experience.
Yeah, Fillmore was sort of the exact opposite.
Fillmore, a bibliophile.
Mm-hmm.
Not terribly built. But
No, not really into physical recreation.
huh.
I think he was 6 foot.
Yeah, Complete Book of U.S. Presidents says Fillmore is 6 feet tall, well-built, generally of sound health,
Yeah.
but not much into physical recreation. Harrison, slim, of average height. Yeah, he's a frontiersman.
Yeah.
He's in the military.
Yeah.
Rose himself up the ranks.
That's right.
Endured hardships.
He's been there and done that. And I think if you're looking prime, Harrison's going to rage on Fillmore.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's fearless. He's out there in the middle of the shooting in the Indian Wars.
And that's it. He is going to win in this particular fight. These cards will go to James J. Hamilton.
Yep.
We'll move on to our next category.
I've got Bill Clinton.
Old Slick Willie versus Calvin Coolidge.
And we're going to be talking post-presidential accomplishments.
Well,
Coolidge wasn't around that long.
no.
No, and then you have Bill Clinton, who still hanging on.
He's hanging in there.
Yeah, looks like Hillary's sucked the life out of him, but he's hanging in there.
Yeah. Yeah, he's had a long post-presidency. He's given, speeches at the Democratic Convention during a lot of recent years, including Hillary's failed attempt.
Mm-hmm.
Came close to being the first gentleman,
Yeah.
but not all the way.
That was a well-timed cough. First gentleman. President Coolidge,
Got out before
first to meet
crash.
with Santa Claus, as there is video evidence to prove. Check it out on YouTube, listeners. Calvin and Grace Coolidge met up with Santa Claus in his post-presidency. First president to meet with old Kris Kringle.
Well, Complete Book of U.S. Presidents does not have a section on Bill Clinton's retirement. The more recent presidents in this book, updated by someone other than William de Gregorio, the original author, not quite up to snuff.
No, they're not.
The publisher of this book ought to hire us to do the updates.
Indeed, we would do a much better job.
Yeah.
Yeah, this doesn't have his post-presidency either, but, I mean, it's like you were saying before.
We kind of know it.
We do. You know, after 43 left office, he teamed up with Bill on the AIDS initiative in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
There's the Clinton Foundation, which functions in some way, although nobody can quite tell us how.
Yeah. Bill, he's done a lot of good charity work. Also done, the Clinton Foundation, which has been criticized as a political slush fund to trade the influence for his wife. And bit of a mixed record.
Yeah, kind of a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Coolidge didn't last very long.
No. He was dead within a few
leaving
years of his
office.
retirement anyway.
Yeah. And he kind of
I think he
lived
wrote a
peacefully
column. Yeah, he didn't
in
do
Plymouth Notch. He wrote his autobiography.
Mm-hmm.
And just kind of retired to private life. Worked on his farm up there. And
Take the card.
Yeah.
Take the card.
I don't know. I think Clinton, he's been around long.
Clinton
and
with his work,
even
like
if
teaming
there's-
up with
he's done a lot of
George
things.
W. and
If there were
I think,
if there is
we
some
have to
shady
go.
things going on, he's continuing to get away with it, which is kind of an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we'll go Clinton on it.
Yeah. Moving on, I've got Richard Nixon. Speaking of getting away with things and not getting away with them.
Herbert Hoover.
Ooh,
Yeah. What you got for us?
we got the
moderator?
category of pre-presidential accomplishments.
Oh.
Now, this is a great category for Herbert Hoover. This is where he shines the brightest. And with Nixon, also,
Not too shabby.
he was the vice president.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can't
Had
saddle
those-
him with Watergate in this category.
no, had those, the first televised presidential debates with JFK.
Losing to JFK.
Yeah. Should have accepted that stage makeup.
Yep. Well, of course, he had 8 years of vice presidential service
Indeed.
under Eisenhower. Served in the Navy for 4 years
That's right.
during World War II. House of Representatives, Senator, Vice President.
Well, and let's not be remiss here. Nixon made a name for himself in the McCarthy era with the Alger Hiss trial. That was huge.
Yeah, he really established himself as an anti-communist.
That's right.
Did he ever?
He's got the great Checkers speech.
Indeed.
President Hoover organized food and relief aid for Europe after First World War.
Yeah,
That was kind of his claim to fame.
that's it. Hoover, incredible humanitarian
Yeah.
during the First World War. He just, he's one of the ones that before and after, okay. Before, great. During, ugh.
Yeah.
After, okay. Not bad.
Yeah.
You know, but this is where Hoover really shines. I mean, he did a huge amount of work
Yeah. Yeah.
in terms of humanitarian effort during the First World War.
He was head of the Commission for the Relief of Belgium, and he was that was 1914 and 1919, and he was director of the American Relief Administration from 19 to 20. Then moved on to be Secretary of Commerce under Warren Harding. And
She carried over into the Coolidge administration. Coolidge infamously quoting, "That man has offered me unsolicited advice for the past 4 years. All of it bad." Well, this is Coolidge's opinion. But,
Coolidge,
I mean,
not a fan.
for his humanitarian efforts,
Yeah, that seems pretty huge.
yeah.
Received international attention for it. The verb, a new verb, hooverize, meaning to voluntarily ration one's goods. Getting the public spirit out of everybody.
Yeah, and this is before, like, his name would be, you know, darkened into the Hooverville type era. I don't know. I think pretty presidential accomplishment-wise, I gotta hand this one to Herbert Hoover.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I think Nixon, I'm not gonna knock him here.
Yeah.
This is a closer one, but I gotta hand it to Hoover. I think Hoover's pre-presidency was pretty great. Wrote a best-selling book, American Individualism. I got a first pressing, just yonder.
Nice.
Today we're in the Stephen Lincoln Douglas Presidential Library, recording this episode.
Moving on, I've got James Monroe.
Barack Obama.
And we are going to be talking about their relationship with the media.
Well, overall,
Obviously, we're talking completely different types of media,
yeah. Yeah.
but, you know, we could talk about the press of Monroe's day. There
was
wasn't
a-
much opposition press in Monroe's day. There's some.
Yeah, the Federalist Party dying at the time.
Yeah.
I think it was a Federalist Massachusetts newspaper that coined the term era of good feelings.
That's it. And despite the Depression under Monroe,
Well, that era of good feelings was at the beginning of his presidency.
yeah.
After, Missouri Compromise.
Well, I'm saying
Panic.
despite that depression,
Some of the
like,
good feelings evaporated. But
exactly knocked.
media-wise, he ran for re-election unopposed.
Unopposed.
So he couldn't have been getting, criticized too heavily. Nobody even bothered to run against him. No opposition party really to speak of by that time.
Things are so different now,
Yeah, Obama, for the most part, was a media darling.
Yeah.
He had his Fox News.
Right? Oh, thank God we don't have to listen to One American News go on and on and on about Obama. I don't think I could take it.
Yeah. He also, he had the majority of the media pretty big fans of him.
Yeah.
Except for Fox News.
Yeah, that's pretty much the exception. Now, Monroe, though, didn't have much in the line of opposition press.
Yeah.
Not too much.
Yeah, I'd almost say more like Monroe's good treatment, almost a product of his times, not necessarily to do with him personally. Whereas Obama, like,
It definitely was.
in times that are very contentious, partisan wise, but him like singularly like standing out as just a personality that is very attractive.
Yeah.
He was always personally a lot more popular than his policies or his party.
Indeed.
Obama, like, he would, if you look at how other modern presidents get treated on like Saturday Night Live and the late night shows, sometimes it seems like they weren't even really trying to really lampoon him much.
Right.
So
Yeah, he got pretty decent treatment. We didn't have Rock Against Obama CDs.
no,
And
he was slow jamming the news with Jimmy Fallon.
He was.
He's on Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis.
yeah, he's doing pretty darn good for himself.
Mm-hmm.
He appeared on Saturday Night Live himself
Yeah.
on his own accord.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a really great speaker, charismatic guy.
Yeah, he's a likable
Really
dude.
Handled the media pretty well.
He did. You got to give him credit for that. I mean, his predecessor and his successor, not so much.
No.
He represents a spike there.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you go back further with Clinton at the beginning, pretty popular. Then at the end,
Yeah.
kind of in between.
Pretty directly related to some shit he was getting himself into.
That's true. But yeah, I think all that being said, I think we could agree that Obama is going to take this.
Yeah. Next up, I've got William Howard Taft. Too bad we don't have hot dog eating contest as a category.
Rutherford B. Hayes.
Oh, this is going to be an interesting, if not really difficult one. We are talking speeches and writings. Both of these guys just immediately strike, I think, the average listener as bland, kind of forgettable. Taft, memorable for the bathtub incident more than anything else among the average American. But let's go beyond this.
I recall, I think it was in the 3-volume Edmund Morris biography of Teddy Roosevelt. I think that's where I heard this, where he was talking about Taft, that Taft would just give these like long-winded speeches where he would just like go on, and all the audience were just like squirming in their chairs trying to like be polite to pay attention to him.
Yeah.
Let's see. But then, looking up here, books written by Taft, 1906, 4 Aspects of Civic Duty. In 1916, Our Chief Magistrate and His Powers. So he did write some books, and also wrote opinions as Supreme Court
That's
Chief
right.
Justice.
Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The position that I think he was best suited for.
Yeah, well, it says here 3 times declined Teddy Roosevelt's offers to put him on the court. So he could have got there instead of the presidency, which in retrospect probably would have been better for him.
Yep.
And for the Republican Party.
Indeed. Although his son, Robert Taft, did become Mr. Republican. Robert Taft, a powerhouse in Republican politics for a long time.
Not much on the writings of President Hayes.
No, there's not too much on his speeches and writings. Supposedly, Rutherford Hayes was the first president to have his voice recorded for posterity. It was on an Edison wax cylinder, which, upon being replayed, destroyed itself. So that recording does not exist. The first president that actually we do have a voice recording of is Benjamin Harrison. It is on a wax cylinder, but it's an improved wax cylinder that didn't eat itself as it replayed. So basically, with that Hayes recording, they got to listen to it once.
Wow.
And it was forever gone. I think this was post-presidential Hayes when that recording was done. The first presidential recording of Benjamin Harrison that does exist is also post-presidency. Nothing for Cleveland. But McKinley on up, you could hear everybody's voice.
Huh.
You could hear Ben Harrison, and then McKinley on up.
Okay.
Hear them presidential voices. Yeah, I mean, there's just not too much going on for Hayes here.
No.
Yeah, I think I'd probably want to give it to Taft just because he wrote a couple books.
That's it.
He's got the
Even if
Supreme Court
his
opinions.
speeches were windy and cringeworthy, I mean, he was doing them. Also,
Yeah.
Taft, I think he had the third longest inaugural address.
Could be.
Maybe the second longest. I'm not positive, but
Who's the longest?
William Henry Harrison. Yeah, that's the infamous, 2 hours in a rainstorm
yeah,
type.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we'll go Taft on this. Maybe it's
Pretty handily.
maybe it's a discredit to Hayes, but there's not enough to base a ruling on.
Nothing here.
So next up,
William McKinley.
FDR.
oof. Effect on the office of the presidency.
FDR gave us presidential term limits.
Yeah, he certainly did. Had a pretty huge effect on the office of the presidency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
McKinley, not gonna knock him though. This is where we became an empire.
Yeah.
Even if it was spurred on by William Randolph Hearst and his papers pushing us into war with Spain.
True, but, what empires have you heard
Not starting with war.
are not starting with war,
Yeah.
starting with someone being nice to somebody else?
Yeah. That one is not in the cards today or ever.
Yeah, but
With McKinley, you got increased Secret Service protection.
afterwards, yeah.
Yeah. After
Yeah,
that
but-
happened, it's like, all right,
Maybe we need to.
we should try and do something here.
Yeah.
Right. You can't just...
We had a president shot in the back of the head. We had a president shot in the back. And now we've had a guy walk up to shake the president's hand, slap his hand out of the way, and shoot him twice in the gut.
Yeah.
Face to face, the most personal presidential assassination in history. Leon Czolgosz coming
I have
up.
to say, I respect that.
I think he's the most badass presidential assassin, but McKinley did have an effect in that regard. Is like, okay, we need increased protection for the president.
Yeah.
Like this is bad.
Yeah.
Robert Todd Lincoln lived to see all three of these.
Yeah.
Was in the near vicinity of all three of these.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Talk about a harbinger of sorrow.
Unlucky.
Metallica
guy,
wrote that
man.
song about Robert Todd Lincoln.
Could have, yeah. Well, obviously FDR had a huge effect on the office of the presidency, but is his effect positive or negative?
That's the thing.
Breaking the two-term
Precedent.
was something that the country ended up rejecting,
Right.
although they pretty much still liked him till the end. That's how he got away with doing it.
Yeah. And although I think FDR was strong in foreign policy, his first two terms, if it had ended there, he wouldn't be considered nearly as high
No.
on the rankings.
Right. Right.
Because he did not helped get us out of the Depression. It took the war to do that.
Right.
Yeah, but his policies in terms of, government intervention in the economy, it really expanded the role of the president. And
That's true.
That's at the time where you start thinking of the president as the manager of the economy,
Yeah.
which is something that wasn't really the
Well,
case so much before.
the imperial presidency,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah, he's probably place where you trace the starting of that in
Yeah.
terms of modern times, with just the expansion of the role in government in general, and then the president over Congress.
Yeah.
And then with, his use of radio and new media, the way the president connects with the people also expanding greatly during his tenure.
Yeah, tearing it up in that regard, like his relationship with the media.
Yeah.
Pretty darn good.
And I guess in terms of the term limits thing, I'm glad that, I think it's a good thing that has been constitutionally adopted. And I guess I'd say it's a good thing that the way we got there wasn't through like some disaster of a president.
That's a good point.
That at least, the terms, FDR's best terms were the ones that he was hanging on too long for.
Right.
And he never lost the people's esteem.
Yeah, his third term is one of the best single terms, I think, in history.
I'd agree with that, yeah.
Yeah. So at least we didn't have like some, someone trying to like tyrannically hold on to power.
That's right.
To have to get a 2-term limit. So
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I have to award this one to FDR.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I agree. I mean, his effect is huge, and in the long run, it might not have been all good things, but in a way,
Well, no, I mean,
somewhat
there's definitely
inevitable
some
things.
shit. I mean, Japanese internment camps is a big,
Well-
blot.
I mean, more just the effects on the presidency.
Yeah. I mean, I think this goes to him.
Yeah.
And that's going to bring us to...
Speaking of effect on the presidency, Andrew Jackson.
Dwight D. Eisenhower.
And they are going head-to-head with foreign policy. Now, actually, this is one that... I don't know that it helps Jackson too much.
Yeah, Jackson's...
Eisenhower...
Supreme Allied Commander.
Yeah. Well, even during his presidency with, we got the end of Korea.
Yeah.
Operation Overlord goes down during Eisenhower.
Yeah, Eisenhower much more foreign policy focused as president.
Indeed.
With yeah.
I think President Jackson had enough fires to put out at home.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jackson, hugely successful in what he was doing, but it was almost all domestic policy stuff.
Right.
I think one of the maybe the biggest foreign policy thing was trying to get France to pay their indemnity that they owed.
Yeah.
And they started to renege on it, and he called it an affront to national honor and asked for increased military spending, like he was not going to take that, and Britain stepped in to mediate, got France to pay it. That was him taking his personality to the international stage, but other than that, not too many big foreign policy things going on.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah, I think,
Whereas, Eisenhower, part of the Cold War,
yeah.
like,
Build up.
yeah.
Eisenhower, in my mind, is again, that the Make America Great Again thing was based off. I think they were thinking about the 1950s.
Yeah.
When people of color were subjugated and didn't, I mean, honestly.
Illegal to beat your wife.
Well, those, like, the Leave It to Beaver and,
Ozzie and Harriet.
yeah. that kind of value.
I Love Lucy.
Well, that's domestic, but I don't know. That's just an aside on my part. But I think in foreign policy, I got to hand it to Ike.
Yeah, he was huge. Like, they could...
Yeah.
It's the Eisenhower... It's called the Eisenhower Doctrine.
Right.
Which is that we have the right to, step in anywhere that communism is threatening to take over countries.
Yeah.
Which, well, kind of leads to Vietnam War. But
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Also partially part of leading to the fall of the Soviet Union eventually.
That's right. Yeah, I think, there's just not enough to say for Jackson.
No.
We're going to go Ike here.
Yeah, Eisenhower pretty big there. Next up, I've got first term Grover Cleveland.
LBJ.
Ooh, and we got first lady accomplishments.
Oh.
Frances Cleveland v. Lady Bird.
Frances Cleveland coming in there at the ripe young age of 21.
That's right.
Part of her first lady accomplishments are having lots of children while being first lady, and then balancing that with a lot of advocacy for different causes.
Well, and Frances Cleveland finds her image on products.
Yeah.
That has never happened before or since.
Yeah, you think it's scandalous that...
Has it? Has any other first lady been like, I'm such and such, and I, eat Skittles? No.
Probably not.
Frances Cleveland's on actual beauty products. Her image.
Yeah.
Julia Tyler before her. But this was pre-first lady.
Well, yeah, Julia Tyler wasn't in there long enough, maybe, but yeah, the country loved Frances Cleveland.
Absolutely.
And she was, somehow not scandalous for the 48-year-old president to marry a 21-year-old. But the people loved it, and she helped him in that regard.
Yeah.
And also worked for a lot of causes. She had there's an episode of Drunk History about Frances Cleveland.
Indeed,
which is
it's
pretty
a great
funny
one. Yeah.
and pretty good. So check that out if you get a chance. Yeah, she did a lot of work for the poor and for African Americans too, I believe.
Yeah. Although the name of the institute was questionable.
What was? I forget.
It was the Home for Friendless Colored Girls.
Yeah. Well, sure, an unfortunate name, but Frances Cleveland was a friend.
Indeed.
Product of her time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Lady Bird. What did Lady Bird have going on?
She was a contributing editor to Ladies' Home Journal. She's an heiress. And she spent part of it on investing in a small radio station in Austin, which she turned into an empire.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. She was an active first lady, but she believed that the first lady should be an island of peace for the president. Basically a place where the president can go and vent his concerns of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And there are no inquiring minds afoot.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't
might
think
have put up with a lot of shit from LBJ.
Yeah.
Like, I read that thing about him, like, hitting on other women right in front of her, groping other women.
Well,
and,
he was a pretty coarse man.
Is that what we're calling it?
He didn't have much of a filter, and I think she was kind of the balance to that in a sense. She was dignified.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's enough to beat Frank Cleveland here.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to give this to Frances Cleveland.
Yeah, I agree. Next up, I've got John Quincy Adams.
And I've got Warren Harding.
And they are going head to head. in relationship with Congress. Now, this is a good battle.
Oh. JQA, not a great relationship with Congress.
No, he's having a heck of a time when he's president. Harding, I guess he gets along with him okay, because he basically toes the line and does whatever they tell him.
Yeah. Yeah,
Go on, get along, as
JQA.
they say.
Yeah, JQA came in with an ambitious agenda for internal
really awesome
improvements,
agenda, really in a lot of ways.
national university, all kind of stuff that he got a couple internal improvements passed, but not a lot. No university. He couldn't even get his delegates to the, what was it, the Pan American Conference or something. He couldn't even get those through Congress in time to get them there before the conference
he
ended.
had a sorry time as president for somebody that was absolutely meant to be president.
Yeah, especially the second half of his term, more Jacksonian supporters taking over Congress.
Yeah, I think that's
And
a
he
shame
really
with
got
John Quincy
screwed.
Adams. I think he was a man that was absolutely meant to be a great president and just did not. It just wasn't in the cards.
Yeah.
Harding, I mean, his relationship with Congress, this might have come up before. I feel like it has. His relationship with Congress was just fine and dandy because he let them run all over him. Mm-hmm. He did whatever his advisors told him to do. It all seemed to go okay, but I mean, you know, then again, you had people in his cabinet committing suicide.
Yeah.
And a hell of a lot of scandal. But
Congress-wise, kind of smooth sailing.
it more or less was. It was,
Yeah.
You're talking rocky shoals against towing the line, drifting about. I think this is going to go to Warren Harding.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Next up, I've got James K. Polk.
I have James Buchanan.
Polk v. Buchanan. This is a good one. Who would you pick first in flag football?
Oh.
This is a great matchup.
Yeah, probably most...
Polk, always sickly. Never in the greatest of health. Buchanan, nearsighted in one eye, farsighted in the other eye. Had to tilt his head in order to see properly. I mean, these guys could be... This is a good showdown here. I think Buchanan's probably the more physically sturdy.
Yeah, I mean, he's big. He's over 6 feet tall. He's broad-shouldered. Like, he's a big guy.
He's just a, kind of a winking, fidgeting sort of, he can't see properly.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a detriment to him. Whereas Polk, I mean, never in the best of health.
No. He's pretty, short, slim, and frail kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is flag football, so...
That's right.
Not a big contact. I mean, regular football, I'd put James Buchanan, as a lineman.
Yeah.
Flag, I don't know. I mean, you'd think he's tall, you could throw a ball to him, but if he can't see...
But if he can't see properly and
What's
he's
he-
like winking and
what's he doing?
squinting trying to find it.
Well, there are other positions in football where you don't necessarily need to see the ball. You just have to see the opponent in front of you.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah, offensive lineman type thing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting matchup for sure.
If I'd pick James K. Polk to be, like, the coach, he'd probably be a
Yeah.
devious strategist.
Mm-hmm. In terms of exercise for these guys, in terms of their recreational activities, Polk didn't have much to speak of.
Yeah, Buchanan doesn't have any physical activities to speak of either, according to the Complete Book of U.S. Presidents.
Yeah, these
He
guys
likes
might be
reading
among
and
the...
entertaining friends.
So these might be among the last chosen in the flag football lineup.
Yeah. I don't know. I'd probably go with Buchanan just because he's a bigger guy. Just throw him out there on the field. He could get in somebody's way. Probably do a little bit more good than Polk. neither of them are going to be stars of the team, though.
That's a fair argument. I think you're bottom of the barrel here. But Buchanan is the bigger guy. I mean, vision aside, I mean, the guy wasn't fucking blind.
Yeah.
You know, he could see. He just was awkward about it.
He could see a big blur coming his way and jump up for it.
Or he could see a big war coming his way and do absolutely fucking nothing.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe we should just call this one a draw. I don't know.
Well, there's not a lot of categories Buchanan wins in, especially not against Polk.
No. Boy. Am I going to be responsible for this decision?
As the moderator, I think it falls solely to you.
Gotta stay objective.
That's right. The guy that owns the complete correspondence of Polk and 2 copies of his diary and 2 vintage books on his life is going to give this hand to James Buchanan.
Yeah. Check out episode 11 to find out about Polk.
That's right.
And then look forward to episode 15.
To learn all about Jimmy Buck.
No athletics will be discussed in either of those episodes.
Correct.
I've got George Washington.
I've got Ronald Reagan.
Washington v. Reagan in biggest partier. That's kind of an interesting one, in my opinion. Reagan probably been to his fair share of Hollywood parties.
Probably as an actor.
Both of his wives, actresses.
Reagan knew how to work a room, right?
Yeah.
You don't just come by that skill overnight. That takes time and years to hone.
Yeah,
Washington very, very formal at
he's
parties.
pretty dignified.
I mean, he would dance and stuff.
Yeah,
at
he
him.
danced with all the ladies. Wanted to dance with Washington, and he obliged them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was very formal at like big parties, but I think in intimate gatherings of friends, he was known to be friendlier.
Mm-hmm.
And join a little drink now and then. I don't think you'd see Washington stumbling around drunk ever. Pretty self-controlled.
Was Reagan a drinker?
I don't think really. No.
Yeah, not
Reagan's pretty straight-laced, too, to be honest. Yeah. And he had the whole war on drugs,
right?
Going on there.
Right.
Yeah.
Didn't start under him, but it was like, that was one of Nancy's big... That was like her, that was her every first lady, like in the recent era, has like a signature, like task, and that was Nancy Reagan's.
Right.
Yeah, she's a bit of a party pooper in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Washington operating one of the highest volume whiskey distilleries in the country.
That's right.
Fueling the party.
Mm-hmm. This is a tough one just because of the times. Like, what you would consider partying. I think, like, Reagan could have probably been found at more rowdy parties than Washington, but I don't see him being at the forefront of instigation for said party. I picture him more like just kind of, he's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there's anything known about Reagan in the Hollywood party scene.
He was pretty straight-laced.
Yeah, I'm sure there aren't any, if there were any wild stories about
he was
him,
wasn't he head of the Screen Actors Guild for a while?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He's a pretty straight-laced guy.
Yeah.
I don't know who would have been the bigger partier. I think maybe early Washington. When he's first setting out, surveying and stuff, maybe he got into his little bit of...
Got into his wine.
Here and there, but I don't know. I don't know if there's a clear-cut bigger partier. These guys are both pretty straight-laced.
Yeah, I don't know. I figure I'd say Washington, dancing with all the ladies at the parties would be his biggest attribute here.
I think so.
Probably low-key having a little fun for himself there.
Yeah.
Probably. I'd give it to Washington just on that alone, because there's really nothing about Reagan.
That suggests
Yeah,
partier.
right.
Yeah. We'll go Washington.
Next up, I've got Andy Johnson.
Versus Benjamin Harrison.
And their relationship with the Constitution.
Well, Andy Johnson loved the Constitution.
Big time.
And he carried a copy of it around with him all the time.
Was buried with a copy of it as a pillow. Just resting under his head.
Mm-hmm. Strict constructionist.
He also had some problems.
Well,
but they were BS, as we've said before.
I mean, his impeachment, he, stood behind the president's power to fire the cabinet, which was really not very controversial when, under the Washington or Adams administration, Adams fired a cabinet member. They were just trying to get Johnson on other things.
That's it.
He was right about that, constitutional-wise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not a great president, but, the president doesn't have any role in it, but it was during his administration that the 13th Amendment and 14th Amendment were ratified, which changed the Constitution pretty radically, the 14th Amendment more than any other.
Harrison strikes me as about average here.
Yeah, there's nothing that really sticks out about Harrison, because he's basically a placeholder president for Grover Cleveland.
Yeah, he's in there.
He can be summed up as that by some. We're gonna try to bring some life to Benjamin Harrison in episode 23 of the podcast.
Yeah, he was part of more. Yeah, we talked about Cleveland reasserting the office of the presidency. Harrison more the typical post-war.
That's right.
Passive presidents.
Yeah, Cleveland the anomaly in that run.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think I got to give this to Andy Johnson.
Yeah,
Because he was the more outspoken about the Constitution.
he was buried with the thing.
That's right.
He stayed loyal to the Union during the Civil War, which is something to speak of.
That's that is
being from Tennessee,
definitely worth mentioning.
and a Democrat. Next up, I've got Woodrow Wilson. Speaking of racist Democrats.
Versus Martin Van Buren.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
Bum, bum, ba-dum. The economy. Poor Martin Van Buren incurs the wrath of Jackson's banking policy, which results in a pretty devastating depression, and his own efforts do not help it, but sadly make it a little bit worse.
Whereas Woodrow Wilson, you have the Internal Revenue Act, large expansion of the government's handling of the economy and banking.
In general, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Federal Reserve System established.
Yeah, Wilson's starting to hearken presidential superpower. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're getting into that. If McKinley was the opening shot of the imperial presidency, Wilson was laying the foundation.
Certainly.
Mm-hmm.
That being said, the economy was better under him.
Yeah. He's got the
Martin Van Buren, he experienced like a piss poor 4 years. He is a pretty unfortunate draw in this category. I think we just gotta go ahead and say right off the bat there's no argument here.
Yeah.
Nope. I'm not even going to try and make one.
I've got Franklin Pierce.
Jerry Ford.
Least scandals.
Ooh. Well,
Ford pardoned Nixon.
yeah.
Yeah. And Pierce had Kansas, Nebraska. Was that scandalous?
I mean, bleeding Kansas was pretty scandalous.
Yeah.
That stuff was going on.
John Brown raiding and hacking to death 5 people.
Charles Sumner caned
Getting
on the floor of
caned.
Congress.
There's a lot going down during Pierce.
Yeah, Pierce also had the Ostend Manifesto, which was a report to the Secretary of State that didn't recommend seizing Cuba, but when it was leaked, it was interpreted as recommending the seizure of Cuba, which was a pretty big embarrassment and forced Pierce to break off his attempts to buy Cuba.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ford
Fell down the stairs of Air Force One.
not exactly a scandal, but an embarrassment. The pardoning of Nixon is really the big scandal.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And we talked about that. That was number 1 on our top 5 pardons. And that hurt him a lot at the time, but I think
in retrospect,
yeah,
absolutely 110% the right thing to do. And even somebody like Ted Kennedy said that.
Yeah, even Ted Kennedy ended up saying it was the right call.
If somebody like him's going to say that, I'm going to give this to Jerry Ford.
Yeah.
The Nixon pardon. But
There's nothing else in here about scandal for him.
no. I think he was what America needed at the time. Like,
I mean, Gerald Ford was notoriously just a nice guy.
Yeah.
Maybe too nice.
It's possible.
Well,
That's going to bring us
we're
to...
down to the last 2 hands.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
I've got Chester Arthur.
Versus Thomas Jefferson.
And we're going to be talking strength of presidential appointments.
Well, now.
Wow. Let's see what Arthur has to speak of here before we declare him the loser of the
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, he appointed Robert Todd Lincoln as Secretary of War.
I was waiting for that.
something.
Yep.
James G. Blaine, Secretary of State. He's a big name.
Returning from Garfield.
Yep. Also Frederick Frelinghuysen in the State Department. Some other guys who I have not heard of in the rest of his cabinet. A couple Supreme Court justices whose names I don't recognize either.
Yeah, when you get into
Serviceable president.
the kind of halcyon days, quote unquote, not a whole heck of a lot
Whereas Thomas
truly
Jefferson.
jumps out. Whereas Thomas Jefferson,
Some of the best ever, probably.
yeah,
James Madison, Secretary of State. Albert Gallatin, Secretary of Treasury. He had Henry Dearborn in the War Department. Robert
Lots of
Smith,
stuff going
Robert Smith, Secretary of the Navy. Seen as more of a nepotism appointment because his brother was a powerful senator.
yeah.
Madison ended up having to make him Secretary of State, but considered him incompetent. Also appointing Meriwether Lewis.
Yeah, that's right. going on their expedition.
He named Monroe as a minister, and also Robert Livingston, who were the ones who negotiated the Louisiana Purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. Jefferson rocking this category.
Put a few guys on the Supreme Court, although none of them ended up doing what he wanted in stopping Justice Marshall's influence. They all kind of got absorbed by him.
Yeah, this is an easy Vic for old TJ.
Yeah. And we're down to the final card in the final category. I've got George H.W. Bush.
JFK.
In the category, if you haven't guessed it by now, is looks.
Oh,
Well,
I think everybody knows him.
yeah.
I mean, the ladies weren't exactly beating down W's door.
HW's door.
Yeah. Well,
That is HW.
Yeah.
H.W. Not a bad looking guy.
Mm.
I'd say above average, presidential looks wise. I think there was
Fair to middling.
I think there was here's a extramarital affair allegation for him out there.
I believe so.
So
But it doesn't hold nothing to
some there was a lady beating down the door, but JFK took the door off the hinges.
Yeah.
And there was just a parade.
Yeah. Yeah. I think universally Kennedy's considered one of the best looking presidents.
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of how he won, just being more photogenic on the televised
That's
debate.
it. I think the
Don't
only one even close to him in this is Pierce. 'Cause it's that long hair. You can kind of sweep back. Give a gentle kiss too.
Yeah, Pierce is pretty handsome, but he lived in the pre-television age where his good looks couldn't really help him as much
That's right.
as JFK.
Yeah, this one's going to Kennedy.
Yep. One of his best categories, if not the best.
Yeah, it's
Looks
a good.
and first lady looks.
Yeah, both
Dominated
great
by that
categories for
card.
Yeah.
JFK, and that's going to bring us to the card count. And we're back with the results. James J. Hamilton
20.
and Jeremy
24.
with 24.
The guest winning once again.
That's it. The
Guests
guests
are undefeated.
undefeated in presidential war.
And
On your own podcast.
we invented this game. We can't win.
I've
I
only
think
won
we
once.
need to somehow change the rules.
There's got to
Make
be
this
something we
somehow
could do.
more
the host
competitive.
starts with a candy cap,
We're
like in golf.
There's got to be a better way.
gotta come up with a way that our what should be superior knowledge of the game at least can play through instead of just the randomness of war,
That's it.
the chaos of war,
The chaos and
and
randomness.
losing in the fog of
That
war.
is
I lost
presidential
even though
war.
I had Washington, Lincoln, Polk, some of the top presidents.
Yeah. Anything could happen in presidential war.
Mm-hmm.
Said it before and we'll be saying it again.
Again,
This
the
is-
true winner, the listeners.
Always
at
the
home.
listener. That's it. That's going to bring us to the end of this episode. Our guest today, Jeremy Lese, a.k.a. Otis. Now, do you care to explain that?
It's not exactly a family-friendly story.
There you go. And for our listeners out there, our previous two guests have been stand-up comedians. Now, that's not Jeremy's line.
No.
Not a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
But,
Well, Dave Rinaldo, more of an improv comedian.
yeah,
Stand up, but
Jeremy here is actually done political work.
That's right.
Would you care to talk about that at all?
Sure. I was a Republican for a long time, about 10 years. That's how I got my start. That's where I've done most of my work, is within the Republican Party. I've worked at every level of politics up to and including the presidential election. I managed a Republican organization for about 4 years. You were at one of our meetings.
I did some photos for you guys.
Yeah.
You guys hired me out.
The party asked me to give a speech for them at one of their events, which you recorded and edited for me, and we threw up on our YouTube page. After the election in 2016, I was in Texas for a while working on congressional races down there. And then same firm I was working for, they sent me to Oregon after that, where I worked on the governor's race. After that, I came back, and everything in this country went to shit. I changed my registration. And if any of you are partisans and you have a problem with something that I'm saying, let it be known, I don't care.
Yeah?
Your party sucks. That is all.
Fairly spoken.
yep. Both major parties
They really do. I've
equally offended here on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I have some good friends who are Democrats. And, one of my very good friends was a staffer, was managing the same territory for Hillary when I was managing it for Trump. We used to meet for cigars and have drinks and watch the debate together. Yeah, really nice guy. I wish we had that in American politics. I might still be involved.
If only the people at the top of the ticket could get along like that.
Yeah, we should all be so fortunate.
Well, one thing that we can be fortunate on is that we have this podcast to help educate our country,
Yes.
our citizens, their children. Everyone can benefit by listening to this podcast.
Yep, the quality of our national discourse goes up one notch every time we release a new episode.
That's exactly correct. And we've come to the end of yet another exciting installment of Presidential War. We'd like to thank our guest today, Jeremy Lese, a.k.a. Otis. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. This
Great
was a lot
game.
of fun.
Great game. Thanks,
Great
Jeremy.
game indeed.
And for the Dead Presidents podcast, I'm Stephen Lincoln Douglas.
And I'm James J. Hamilton.
And we'll see you next time.